Alright, everything here should be set. That's turned off, that's turned off, that's turned on, and we should be live. So let's hope I did everything right here, and we will get started. Hello, Shadowcat back, and today I wanted to springboard off of the conversation that we had last week when we were talking about hypocrisy. And this idea that it's been an abused word, that the idea that what people are accusing of hypocrisy is not actually hypocrisy. It is simply a different culture, different values, different principles, and that by cloaking what people are doing under the veil of hypocrisy, we actually rob people of who they are. In particular, we actually end up making excuses for bad behavior and malicious behavior when it is absolutely and utterly unwarranted. And so we, as a people, need to be better at identifying not hypocrisy, but people who are different, people who believe different, who think different, who act different, who are different from you. We need to identify them and treat them as if they are a different people. Now, not going to go through and rehash everything that we did before. Today, I want to talk about some of the knock-on effects of that. And I want to do so in the context of a 200-year-old letter. This is not going to be a very long conversation today. I mean, we're not going to be on this one for very long. I didn't have anything well prepared. This is going to be a quick one. So before we get into that, where's my chat? Pop out the chat. There it is. Now I can read it. I see that JP is in the chat. Hello, JP. Good to see you. JP, already chatting, says, "Don't just be different, be divergent." I heard that was a good movie, but I've never seen any of them. Okay, I didn't hear it was a good movie. I heard it was okay, but it wasn't bad. Apparently, it was a lot like The Hunger Games, and I saw those movies. Those were okay. Divergent, I guess it's in like the same vein. It's like, you know, kind of tween young adult book series that they turn into movies. I don't know. Maybe I'll see it someday. Could be worth it if I can find the time. Because right now I don't have a whole lot. What was the movie we just got yesterday? Oh right, I just found out. My parents got the movie. What's it called? What's the Hunger Games prequel? It's like something about snakes. Anyway, they got that and they're just like, so we can watch it. It's like, if I can find the time, I'd love to. I still haven't seen Dune 1 or 2. I still haven't seen Wonka. I still haven't seen a lot of things. And it's like, I have a Crunchyroll subscription because I like anime. Do you know how many anime I've watched since I got Crunchyroll? None. I'm literally just burning money at this point. It's fine, though. Anyway, back on subject. I wanted to talk about a letter, and this is a letter written by John Adams to the Massachusetts militia, and under any other circumstances, this letter should, by all rights, be relegated to just another piece of parchment in history. However, with the current state of the United States right now, and to a lesser extent, other Western nations such as Canada, such as Great Britain, such as Germany, France, Spain, Portugal, all of these other nations, it is spelled out explicitly in the US, but it is also implied implicitly in the other Western nations that we are a good nation with good laws for good people. And to that end, I suppose we should get into the actual letter first, and then we can discuss it further. So let me just make sure that I have this set up. I do not have this set up. See, this is what happens when I reboot my computer. I gotta fix everything. There we go. So let's just slide this down there, and we will read. I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger too. Okay, so from John Adams to the Massachusetts militia, the 11th of October in the year of our Lord, 1798. Now, some things in here are redacted for reasons that I do not quite understand. And I don't know what the original letter actually said. So we're going to have to take this as what it is. It has everything that we need. But let's read it. To the officers of the 3rd Brigade? 1st Brigade? I'm not sure. Oh, wait. 1st Brigade of the 3rd Division of the Militia of Massachusetts. Gentlemen, I have received from Major General Hull and Brigadier General Walker of your unanimous address from Lexington, animated with a martial spirit and expressed with a military dignity becoming your characters and the memorable plains in which it was adopted. Now, I suppose it'd be better to actually look up what that was. I don't know what that is off the top of my head. While our country remains untainted with the principles and manners which are now producing desolation in so many parts of the world, while she continues sincere and incapable of insidious and impious policy, we shall have the strongest reason to rejoice in the local destination assigned us by Providence. But should the people of America once become capable of that deep simulation towards one another and towards foreign nations, which assumes the language of justice and moderation, while it is practicing iniquity and extravagance, and displays in the most captivating manner the charming pictures of candor, frankness, and sincerity, while it is rioting in rapine and insolence, this country will be the most miserable habitation in the world. Because we have no government armed with power capable of contending with human passions unbridled by morality and religion, avarice, ambition, and revenge or gallantry, would break the strongest cords of our Constitution as a whale goes through a net. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. An address so unanimous and firm from the officers commanding 2,800 men consisting of such substantial citizens as are able and willing in their own expense completely to arm and clothe themselves in handsome uniforms does honor that division of the militia which has done so much to honor their country. Oaths in this country are as yet universally considered as sacred obligations. That which you have taken and so solemnly repeated on that venerable spot is an ample pledge of your sincerity and devotion to your country and its government. Signed by John Adams. Now I actually wonder what the militia was talking about. I'll also have to see if I can look that up and maybe share that later. But the point is that I want to get to what he said down here. And that starts because he writes in really long sentences. Yes, right here. But should the people of America once become capable of that deep simulation towards one another and towards foreign nations, which assumes the language of justice and moderation while it is practicing iniquity and extravagance. So in other words, just to translate that into modern text, simulation, in other words, to fake. So simulation towards one another, so being fake towards each other and towards other nations, which assumes the language of justice and moderation. Pretty straightforward. While it is practicing iniquity and extravagance. In other words, You say one thing, you do the other. This, of course, goes back to the conversation that we had last week about hypocrisy, which is literally saying or expressing one thing while engaging in something antithetical or critical to that. So, and displays the most captivating manner of the charming pictures of candor, frankness, and sincerity. Okay, frankness and sincerity, basically just being open, honest. While it is rioting in rapine and insolence. So, rapine, if I go through the dictionary in my head, rapine is basically just immature behavior. It is animalistic behavior. It's acting like an uncivilized person. And insolence, of course, is a word that we're more familiar with. It is rebelling against authority or ignoring that authority outwards. This country will be the most miserable habitation in the world. Now, as it stands right now, we live in this nation, okay? We do practice iniquity and extravagance on a daily basis. Almost every single person in the country is guilty of extravagance. We live better than every single other nation in the world. And for many of us, that is not enough. It's not necessarily our fault. It is the fault of generations that have gotten away from the ideals of humility, which we've talked about if you go back and listen to my lecture on the 7 deadly sins and the concept of evil. Okay, so he continues to say, because we have no government armed with the power capable of contending with human passions unbridled by morality and religion. Now, I want to get into that because we really have to understand what he means when he says this, and this goes straight back to the founding of this nation. So I've gone through this, and I believe I went through this in my my very first direct message on laws. But the United States Constitution and the Declaration of Rights, it constrains the government under the concept of what are called negative rights. That is to say that the government grants you nothing. You are not necessarily granted anything by the Constitution because, as it says in the preamble, these are your inalienable rights granted to you by God. Or, if you're not a religious person like myself, these are your natural rights that you have simply by existing. I mean, you have the right to say whatever you want. This is true. You have the right to defend yourself. You have the right to not have your things taken. Okay? And then we get into some more civil rights things, like the idea that you are due process. Because we want to live in a civilization where you cannot simply be found guilty on a whim. Which, of course, we're seeing that being torn to shreds right now in our modern day legal system, but that's a different thing. The government has negative rights. It is not allowed to obstruct your freedom of speech, religion, press, petition, and assembly. It is not allowed to deprive you of the means to defend yourself or punish you for defending yourself. It is not allowed to take your things for absolutely no reason, just because you have things and they want them. It is not allowed to do all of these things. It is not allowed to violate your natural or God-given rights. As such, because the government is restrained in such a way, it means that the government is not necessarily capable of going out and just doing the things that would be necessary in the event that the people became essentially a threat to it. While you, as a person, are allowed to defend yourself, and the government is not allowed to prevent you from defending itself, the government itself is incapable of defending itself, or at least it's supposed to be. This actually kind of gets to the idea that, people should not be afraid of their government, the government should be afraid of its people. That's where we come back to this part. No government armed with the power capable of contending with the human passions unbridled by morality and religion. In other words, if people decided they were going to rampage through and burn down the Capitol, well, the Capitol doesn't really have any way of stopping that. This is pre the idea that there would be a massive army, inside the Capitol at all times. As a matter of fact, this is 1798. This is pre the Civil War. This is when we still refer to the United States as these United States. There was basically no federal anything. There was a collection of militias, and if the U.S. had to go to war, we could draw an army from those militias. That was about the best we had. Now, no power capable of contending with human passions unbridled by morality and religion. And this is where we have to get into the idea of what are laws, and I'm not going to rehash my entire direct message, but what are laws, what do they represent, and how do they work? As I pointed out in my direct message and last week when we talked about hypocrisy, I can declare that a property line exists here. You can't see my hands right now, but just picture them, okay? There's a property line here, and if you step over that line, well, then you're breaking the law. That would be trespassing or burglary. Technically just be trespassing. If you entered the home, that would be burglary. But trespassing, all the same. But there's not actually anything stopping you from doing it, except in your belief that stepping over that line would be trespassing, and that trespassing is a crime. It's a punishable crime. And if you were to do that, you should be punished, especially if you did so intentionally. Accidentally, there may be an argument to make, and that's where the idea of due process comes in. However, if you were to introduce a population of people who did not believe in property lines, did not believe in private property, did not believe in any of the things that you believe in, then they're going to simply step over that line. And after they step over that line, if you try to stop them, they're going to attack you. Why? Because you, by their reference, from their perspective, have absolutely no right to stop them, no more so than they would have any right to stop you from defending yourself if you were under attack. Here we see we have two completely separate ideals, two completely separate cultures. And the law under those cultures fades away into the illusion that it always was. This means that we have a government, we have a country, we have a nation and states only so far as we all agree that they exist and we all agree to abide by them. And why do we abide by them? Because we are a population who is bridled. We all agree to follow the same morality and, at the time, religion. Because while we did have many different denominations, we were all still Christian. It was a Christian nation, and therefore, we all shared the same morals and values. The letter then goes on. Avarice, pride, ambition, and revenge or gallantry, would break the strongest cords of our Constitution as a whale goes through a net. Let's compare this to our modern times. So avarice, hubris, pride, all the same thing. Do we suffer from pride in modern day times? That is a rhetorical question. We have an entire federally recognized month celebrating pride. Ambition? Oh, absolutely, we are a nation guilty of ambition. Now, to be fair, not all ambitions are bad. People need to be ambitious about what they're doing. But ambition can go too far, and it can go too far very easily. Revenge? Oh, absolutely. We are a nation currently consumed with revenge. As a matter of fact, Donald Trump, the former president of the United States and the hopeful future member of the United States, has actually run his campaign on the concept of revenge. There have been signs that have been made up with his image, except instead of "Make America Great Again," it has literally just been his face and the word revenge. And on the other side of that, you literally have people claiming that everything that is being done to Trump right now, every court case he's in, every gag order that he's under, every fine that has been placed on him, has been revenge against him for having the gall to even run the country. And that is the highest tiers of the government. That says nothing about the levels of revenge that are in the population as a whole. We have conservatives and progressives at each other's throat every single day. We have school shootings with manifestos left behind claiming revenge on straight people, on white people. We have people being shot in the streets in places like Portland for the crime of belonging to the wrong party or wearing the wrong color hat. We are consumed by revenge. And if you were here for my video, for my lecture on the idea of reparations, retribution, restitution, and revenge, you will know that the only thing that really separates the idea of restitution from revenge is that restitution is measured. It has an end goal, and it has an end point to stop. Revenge has no such thing. Revenge is primal. All it wants to do is harm. It wants to break, to burn, to destroy. It is completely unbound by any kind of moderation. And that is what we are steeped in right now. Or gallantry. Now, why is gallantry in here? The reason gallantry is in here is because not only do you have the three of these things to contend with, which are bad enough on their own, but gallantry, this idea that you present yourself as if not only are you doing all of these things, and not only are all these things bad, but that you are the hero for doing it. That not only are you doing these things, as the meme says, that they are a good thing. Okay? Remember, first, it's not happening. Second, you're not doing it. Thirdly, you are doing it, but, it's not a big deal. And then fourthly, you are doing it, and it's a good thing. That's where the gallantry comes in. So, these would break the strongest chords of our Constitution as a whale goes through a net. Now, when it says the chords of our Constitution, what it's talking about is essentially the accords of our Constitution. Basically, the agreement that we all have. We all believe in the Constitution. We all obey the Constitution. We all follow the Constitution, and we are all held under the Constitution. quite clearly, anybody who submits themselves to avarice, ambition, revenge, and gallantry does not believe themselves to be under the Constitution, which is what we see going on today. We literally have people that have been arguing for the complete and utter abolition of the Constitution as a whole. I mean, we have always had people that have said, maybe we should repeal the Second Amendment. And while that is absolute madness, at least they stopped there. But that kind of moderation doesn't exist anymore. No, now we have people who are arguing for the complete rewriting or the complete replacement of the Constitution of the United States. Particularly those who say that the Constitution is a living document and it needs to adapt and change over time. While it is true that the Constitution is a living document, that does not mean that it's going to completely metamorphose like a butterfly would. No. It stands there for a reason. And of course, it's because of that reason that people want it to be gone. It is essentially the last thing that stands in the progressives' way from completely taking over the country. Because while they already do not abide by the Constitution, it is still something that keeps them in check because there is always that risk that by doing what they are doing, they could face consequences for it. This has happened in several different instances. For example, I just heard one this morning. If anyone is familiar with Nate the Lawyer, he put out a video this morning talking about a judge, and I don't remember where it was. However, the judge was, I guess, elected into position. However, the prosecution office or district attorney, whatever it was, didn't like the judge, okay? Which, I mean, is fine. I kind of think that the prosecutor and the judge should have an adversarial relationship. However, the judge didn't like this, and so the judge went to war with the prosecution office to the point where the judge actually held the prosecution, or the prosecutor's office, in contempt of the court, barred them from the court, and took over the role of prosecutor in her own courtroom while she was also the judge. So she was both judging and prosecuting at the same time, which is completely antithetical to our entire legal system. Now, in that case, she was found guilty of doing this, as well as many other crimes, and stripped of her position, stripped of her license, stripped of her duties, and basically just cast low. But the fact is that this happened, and the fact that it was even possible for it to happen is what we need to, is really the point that I'm trying to drive home here. Because there was nothing in place to stop this from happening in the first place. We did have tools to fix it afterwards, but there was nothing to stop it in the first place. Now, in this case, it was just one judge, one courtroom, in one district, in one city, in one state. Okay? This case was an extremely small impact. I mean, it had a large impact on the people who had to go through there, but in the grand scheme, very, very small impact. But what would happen if it wasn't just a single courtroom? What if it was the highest echelons of the nation? That would essentially destroy the United States of America entirely. Which is what John Adams was getting to when he said, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." When the United States was founded, it was founded on the idea of freedom. The United States had just broken away from England. And under the monarchy, everything that the monarchy said went. That meant that the monarchy had enforced a state religion. You had to follow that. You were not necessarily allowed to follow anything else. You could, of course, but you would be treated differently because of it. After all, even back then, there were some people who were Jewish, there were some people who were Muslim, not very many. They were an extreme minority to the point where they would pretty much go unnoticed, and you might even get a smattering of other various cultures in there too. There wasn't a lot of trade between India, but if you looked hard enough, I'm sure you could probably find at least one Hindu person in all of 1800s England. Still though, it was the state-enforced religion, and you would be forced to recognize it. The idea of due process didn't really exist back then. Neither did the idea of self-defense. If you wanted to defend yourself against the crown, defending yourself against the crown was as much a crime as whatever the crown was coming after you for. So when the United States was founded, it was done so on the idea that we are all individual people, and that we come here, we gather here in this nation so that we can all be a free people together, that we can all speak as we wish, believe as we wish, practice as we wish, assemble with whoever that we want to, with no supreme authority over us, to tell us that we can or cannot do as we want to do in our lives so long as we are not harming anyone else. That the government exists to serve the people, not rule the people, with only a single mandate to its name: to protect those people and to protect their rights. And while we all agreed on these tenets, everything was fine. However, this did not last. After all, later on, in, not even, I guess it'd be about half a century or so, we had the U.S. Civil War, where we had our first really big disagreement on who are the moral and religious people. We had those who believed in slavery and those who did not believe in slavery. We had those who believed in self-governance and those who did not believe in self-governance. We had those who just didn't like the way everything was being run in general. And so eventually several states decided they would not be a part of this nation anymore, that they would secede from the nation and become their own Confederate states. And then the other half of the country said, absolutely not. We will not allow this. We fought, we bled, we died to get you into the Union, and it is only through blood and death that you will get out of it. And so that was the first big conflict we had over this. Of course, they lost and everything was reunified, but that scar remained. And after that, the Constitution was never really for a moral and religious people again, or at least the country wasn't. The Constitution still is. And I mean, laws as a whole still are, but the government was changed by this, and not for the better. And things only deteriorated from there. We wouldn't see the first really big deterioration until the Great Depression, when there were a lot of different ideas of how to handle it, and we got our first really progressive president in, and that would have been Eisenhower, I do believe, with the New Deal. Pretty sure it was Eisenhower. Definitely know it was the New Deal, which was an incredibly progressive policy that was pushed across the nation, and honestly didn't really help a whole lot. It did help things in the short term. It severely harmed them in the long term. It was also where we instituted the Internal Revenue Service, and there was also the start of the income tax, which has been a contentious issue ever since. As we keep going forward, we enter into the period of the 1960s, where we further saw the ideas of morality and religion breaking down among the basic population, We saw the first really big divides forming between the two major political parties in the United States, as well as the death of pretty much every single other political party in the United States. And it's only continued from there until we reach the point that we are at now, where we are actually not a moral and religious people. We are two completely separate cultures occupying the same nation. What essentially we are at this point are twins in the womb, and there is not enough nutrients for both to survive. And so one is going to have to get rid of the other. And one is trying really, really hard to do that. And there is nothing that the government can do about this. Without, of course, throwing everything to the wayside that the Constitution was founded on. And it's arguable that we've already done this, because in order for the government to establish a new order, it would have to establish what you can say, what you can do, what you can worship, who you can associate with, and what you're allowed to write. Because if you do not do that, you will continue to have the conflict there. If you do that, you have lit the Constitution on fire. There's also the rights of things like due process, which we have seen eroded to the point of barely being even an illusion of a right. People either have the right to free speech, or you can do what you feel needs to be done. We have, or not, I said free speech, you have the right to due process, or you can do what needs to be done. And we have opted to do what we feel needs to be done. We will make every accusation we have to, we will fabricate whatever evidence we need, and we will punish as liberally as we feel we have to get the results that we need. The idea of states' rights, gone completely out the window. States will do what the government says, unless, of course, the state itself secedes in a soft manner and tells the government that it will have no further part of it. To wit, states like California, states like Texas, any place like that. The country was founded for one particular people who wanted to follow laws. They weren't necessarily bound to those laws. As I pointed out, a property line is just an invisible imaginary line. There's nothing stopping people from doing it. They obeyed the laws because they wanted to. They were moral because they wanted to. We don't have that anymore because we have a completely separate culture that does not want to anymore. They have their own set of morality. They have their own religion. I have spoken at length about how exactly, and I still contend with Tim Pool on this one. It is not a cult. It is a full-blown religion. It has its own temples. It has its own ecclesiarchy. Everything is there. Okay? So they have their own morals, they have their own religion, they have their own institutions, they have their own beliefs, they have their own laws. They reject our laws, they reject the laws on paper in this country. And they would replace our laws with theirs given the chance. They're having some success in different parts of the country already. This is not hypocrisy, this is literally who they are. Hence why I really wanted to talk about this. Because the country as it stands right now cannot stand. It is a house divided. And we have to rectify this. Now, I don't know how we rectify this. I think that we are far, far past the point of no return on this one. And much like the previous Civil War, which could only be ended with blood and violence, I feel like this is also only going to be resolved through blood and violence. because you have two completely separate cultures at this point. There is nothing, not a single issue, that they are in agreement on. This is essentially a religious war, which I have also spoken to at length. The two factions in the United States could not coexist any more than the Jews and the Muslims can coexist. It is a matter of faith, it is a matter of practice, and each side vehemently rejects the other. Now, what happens after that, though? Because that is inevitable. Someday it will happen because it has to happen. Someday a new nation must be born. Anyone who's ever known someone is pregnant knows that when the day comes, there is no arguing with it. It's happening now. The question then becomes, what happens after it? Can we go back to being this country? Okay? Can we have a constitution again? Can we have a country again for a moral and religious people? I don't know. I do think that if the conservative side wins, it's possible. However, even if the conservative side was to win the looming conflict, we must keep in mind that they will institute, most likely, the current constitution, which is made for a moral and religious people. And what does that mean? That means that in another 200 years, we're back to where we started now. Because if the government is going to be completely free, if it is going to allow basically anyone to do anything they want, then eventually, inevitably, we are going to have this problem again. All it is going to take is for one faction of people to simply reject living in society, to form their own society, and then to rise up against the current society. It is actually very interesting because it almost seems like this was the design from the start. I do believe it was also John Adams, maybe it wasn't someone else, that said the tree of liberty must occasionally be refreshed and watered through the blood of tyrants and patriots. I'm paraphrasing that because I don't remember it exactly. But perhaps those words were not necessarily a warning, perhaps those words were prophecy. Maybe he understood that eventually the nation would fall into degeneracy and tyranny, and it would have to be redone. And so the idea that even if the conservatives win, another 200 years goes by and we're back here again, perhaps that's the way it's supposed to be. Similarly, if the progressives win, since, many of them are admittedly self-avowed communists, we know how that goes. Because in every single communist nation through history, we have seen the cycle rotate again and again. The conservatives may take another 200 years to go through that cycle. Communists can do it in 2 years. They rebel, they revolt, they eventually start a coup, and once the coup is successful and they take over, the first thing they do is they exterminate all of the revolutionaries, because you don't want to have revolutionaries around after you've just taken power. And then they rule like tyrants until another group decides to rebel against them. And that group will rebel, it will revolt, it will instigate a coup, and the entire thing can rotate over 5 times in a decade. So we may have the same problem here, just in different ways. But even if we accept that both of them may be in cycles, under progressivism, there is no country made for a moral and religious people. It is a tyranny. You do what we tell you to do. You do, or you go where we tell you to go, and you say what we tell you to say. But that is not the United States. That is not what the United States has ever been. That's not what it was ever meant to be. It was meant to be a free nation. And it's because of that freedom that we are here where we are. And it's very interesting because, as I want to start wrapping this up, we've had many cautionary tales about this. And one that comes out to my mind the most is an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, where they have an actual witch hunt trial by an overly zealous judge who is trying to essentially twist the law to her favor to take down anybody and everyone that she doesn't like. And the end of the episode is very poignant because it was one of the crew that had been assisting her in rounding up all of the other members of his own crew and essentially serving them up to her on a silver platter. He lamented afterwards that he did not realize what he was doing. He thought he was only doing his job. To wit, Captain Picard, the main character of the show, explains to him those who, would cloak their actions in a black cape and twirl a mustache are easily identified. Those who cloak their actions in what's the word that I want here? Essentially, those who say that they're doing everything for the good of society and for the good of the people, they're much harder to spot, but not impossible. Vigilance is the price of freedom. And that if we were to remain a vigilant society to root out these things and make it clear that anybody who is not a moral and religious person by our own standards is not welcome. If we maintain vigilance and root out those people, we can keep it. But we also have to recognize that there is a bit of a contradiction there, because the nation is founded on freedom. But it is only freedom if the people who are also here also believe in that freedom. It's a paradox that we find ourselves in today, where we express a need for tolerance, and yet that expressed need for tolerance has led to us tolerating people who would use censorship, weaponized justice, and imprisonment for those that they feel they do not need to tolerate. This is something that is changing. We are seeing more and more people who are beginning to realize that free speech and freedom in general can only be extended to people who believe similarly in freedom. In other words, we are beginning to recognize that this moral nation should only be open to other people who are moral, and that if you are a person who does not believe in free speech, then you should not have free speech extended toward you. If you do not believe in the morals and the principles of this nation, then perhaps this nation should not be extended to you. Perhaps it should not be offered. And perhaps it should even be taken away. Because we are reaching a point where, when the conflict comes, whoever is left from the other side will be offered a choice. And that will be to either live in exile or live in subjugation to the other side. Just like in the first Civil War, the Confederate peoples were forced to live in subjugation to the Union as the country was brought back together. So too in the next conflict, if the conservatives win, the progressives will be subjugated, and vice versa. One way or another, though, the nation will be restricted to whoever is willing to abide by it. because it is the only way that it can work. And even if it is cyclical, even if it is bound to happen again, for a while, for a time, it will work for the people who are moral and religious to that ideology. Now we just got to wait and see which one it is. But I just want to talk about this one because this is 200 years old. It's over 200 years old. And this really gets to the core of everything that is the problem right now. We have a nation, but we have a group of people who do not believe this nation. When you see things like the trial in New York, recognize that this is not hypocrisy, and they are not violating well, okay, they are technically violating the Constitution, but it's not their Constitution. When you see people marching in the streets and shouting, recognize that it's not that they're trying to express their freedom of assembly and petition all that. No, this is a war. This is why they go through and they feel that they can do anything, that they can steal whatever they want to as they move, that they can set fire to buildings and such, that they can block entire thoroughfares, they can close down bridges, they can shut down infrastructure. That's not protest. That is an act of aggression by an enemy force inside the nation. These are not people who are a moral and religious people. Or if they are, it certainly isn't to yours. And they should be treated accordingly. With that, though, I'm going to go ahead and cut this off early. Like I said, this was not going to be a very long one. I just wanted to touch on this because it's been rolling around in my head for a while. And so I wanted to make sure that I got this one out. Because these videos are as much my way to put things down on paper, kinda, as anything else. So, with that being done, I'm going to go ahead and cut it off here. I have no idea what I'll be doing next week. If I'm even going to think of something next week, I don't know. Maybe I'll take a week off. I'm not sure. But I will let you know what is coming when that time comes. If you enjoy the tabletop streams, we will have one tomorrow. We're almost done with the Eldar. We're getting close. We gotta finish up a couple of weapons for the rates, and then we gotta talk about the Eldari culture. And then we should be able to move on, I think. So, if you want to hear more lectures like this, if you're into the whole socio-cultural politics of the world, make sure you subscribe, hit the bell icon, that way you get notified when these videos come out. If you know somebody else who could also use this discussion, perhaps they're still trying to grasp how the world is actually working, and they're having a hard time reconciling what they see on TV with what's happening in their lives, share this video with them. It may offer them clarity. Otherwise, though, if you like what I'm doing, leave a like on the video. If you want to leave comments down below, you can do that down below. You can do that in the chat. You can join the Discord. I encourage you to join the Discord. We're friendly there. So come join us there. Otherwise, though, I will see you either tomorrow for the tabletop stream or for a future lecture. Either way, I'll see you then. Take care.